Kathy Fowler.
And I'm Mark Silverstein.
And you are listening to After Deadline, the media podcast.
An amazing interview today. Bryan Custer, you know him from ESPN. You know him from Showtime Boxing. You know him
Sports.
You know him from before that, SNY. He's got the Last Stand podcast. He's the busiest guy in sports broadcasting.
And you actually met him when he was a young pup.
We worked together. We were going to talk about, maybe
back in the
day of hanging out in Columbus, Ohio, his hard work. There's so many lessons to be learned from this interview with Bryan Custer, just about hard work, being the best hire your boss has ever had, to giving a moment of thanks. I mean, the guy's just amazing. And I don't know how he does it all, but he does it all, including we talk about his battle with prostate cancer and how he's been very public and open about it and sharing it and making a difference with people. So without any more ado, let's get to Bryan Custer, Showtime, ESPN podcaster, a legend. All right, we're thrilled you're here. We're very excited to talk with you. But let's get to the point. You started out in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
The most important point.
The most important point there is our paths crossed. And you were first in radio, right? You were at 610 TVN,
yeah.
Right? And
And
you covered news and sports, or just news?
So I was at TV and radio. I did the overnights. That's how I started. I was working midnight to 8. And so I would come on at the top of the hour and do that 5-minute newscast with Steve Hansel. I remember he was with me until like 5 o'clock. And then at 6 is when Bob Connors would come in. And then I would sit in with him and do it with him from 6 to 7. And then Sally and the rest of the people would take over.
So the kids, if you're listening, if you're playing at home, he worked from 12 midnight to 6 a.m.
Yeah. Yes.
And see where he ended up.
That's right.
Yeah.
See how that works out.
I was one of those guys where me and my friends, after we graduated from college, we would go out to the club, and I would maybe be at the club for maybe 30 minutes because you got to the club at 10 o'clock anyway. And I was there to maybe 10:30, and I was like, "Oh, I got to leave, guys. I got to get to work. I got to go." And that was how my nights were.
I used to, maybe around the same time, I used to work overnights at WBNS for those news cut-ins. And
yes.
I would do the same things. I would go out and I was like a Cinderella. I had to be at work at midnight. So I'd be like, okay, party on. Just when it got started, I had to leave.
Absolutely. I remember those nights.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you run out on stories though too and overnight?
I did. I ran out on stories. So they were like, look, we want you to be an all-encompassing news operation. So and I had the scanner, I had all these scanners in that newsroom. They were like, if you hear a shooting, you hear a big fire, then we want you to take the news car, drive out there, and then at the top of the hour, you go live with that, and you make sure you have some sound from the battalion chief or the detective on charge of that shooting, and you lead with that, and then you go into the other news, and then you throw it to weather.
You can't forget weather, yes. But if it was overnight, if it was any time of day or whatever, if we got to a story, and if you weren't there or Steve Brusk wasn't there, then it wasn't worth covering because you were always there before anybody else.
Yes, absolutely. The ringing I could still feel the ringing in my ears from those scanners because we had about 5 of them all around, and that's all I would listen to. And I would have to call the police desk and see, hey, I heard about this. Now, is this a bad shooting? Is this a really big fire? It's a 4-alarm? Okay, thanks. That's all I need to know. And boom, I'm out the door.
I once got stopped on the way. It was a 4 o'clock in the morning. What was the Beltway there? It was 270 or whatever it was.
270, I think.
I was on 270 and I'm rushing to a fire and I get pulled over by a cop and literally he came out and he said, "Where's the fire?" And I said, "Well, it's down there." And I'm
actually going to
the fire that you were being sarcastic about. All right, go ahead. But
they need to give you a ticket anyway.
Kathy, I think Mark is really trying to be humble. Back in those days, Mark wasn't going out with no fires at 4 o'clock in the morning. Mark was the type of guy that would be laid up in the newsroom. He had his legs kicked up. He had a producer named Selena Colt who sat right across from me. Selena did all the work. And then he would say, Mark, do you want to do this story? I guess so. Yeah, let's make somebody some money, or let's help this poor soul out. Okay, sure. That's a great 6 on your side story.
Hey,
And
look
then,
at the time. I got to go. And that's where you learn. That's where I took you under my wing and taught you how to do exactly that. I would say to Selena, can you make the story not suck? And then, and you sat there at SYX and learned from myself and Phil Hayes.
Yep.
And that's
Absolutely.
And if you learned anything, it was to stay out of those clubs another half hour later.
Exactly right. He was the star. He was the star there when we were at Channel 6, the ABC affiliate there in Columbus. So don't let him try to fool you, Kathy. Oh, yeah, I was burnt. I was at 4 a.m. And this guy had his own producer. He had it all. It was the 6 on your side department was Mark Silverstein at that time. So.
And now I think he's trying to take credit for where you are today. I don't know.
Dude, Venmo, whatever you want to do.
I think that might be a stretch, Mark. I don't know. I think that's what you call, now that you're in marketing, I think that's called spend.
Exactly.
But we are going to take select clips of this, and I'm just going to play them over and over for my.
Yeah, I bet you will.
So you did sports and news at WSYX in Columbus.
Here's the true story. As Mark was talking about, every night I work basically midnight to 8. And when I first got hired, first thing I asked them was like, I want to do sports. And they were like, nah, we just got news. We already have a guy. George Lehner does sports. He's a legend. And so I was like, okay. So I wanted to get in. So I did it and I was doing it. And obviously I did it relatively well. And so they promoted me after a year and said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to move you to morning shift. And so then I worked from 10 to 6, and then they pushed my hours back. They said, we're going to make you work from noon to 8 because we want you to start covering different beats. We want you to start covering City Hall. We want you to start covering the school board. And that's kind of where I made a name for myself because, look, I was at the time like 23, 22 years old kid at City Hall, interviewing Greg Lashukka, who was mayor at the time, and Michael Coleman, who was the former mayor of Columbus, was my neighbor. And so I'm like,
wow, these are names from the past. Greg Lashukka, have not heard that name in 20 years. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
And he was so impressed because he couldn't believe how young I was and that I was working at TV and radio and that I was always there. That was my beat. So I always came to City Hall. And I just made a name for myself doing that and breaking stories. And the crazy thing, we had a woman who worked at WTVN, and I can't remember her first name. I just remember her last name was Hevel. She was the wife of the news director at the ABC affiliate at Channel
Mike
6.
Hevel. Mike Hevel was
Trish is her name. That was
Hevel,
Trish. Trish Hevel. She used to always come to me and say, "You are the best dressed guy in radio," because I would wear like button-up shirt, blazer, khakis, or the only time I would be casual is maybe I would wear jeans, still a button-up shirt, still a blazer. And everyone else on radio.
Let me jump in here. This is why I'm wearing a suit for you today. This is why
I love it.
Yeah, I had a tie on, even, but this guy dresses up.
You always say dress for the job that you want, not dress for the job that you have. So there you go. You knew you were going places, and radio was not totally it.
Exactly. And so Trish used to tell her husband, "Man, we got this guy. He's great." And he was like, "Is it the guy basically I hear in the morning?" She said, "Yeah." So one day I got a phone call, I was in the newsroom, and he said, "Hey, I'm Mike Hevel. I'm the news director at Channel 6. And he said, I'd like to meet you for dinner. And I want to talk to you about coming over." And I thought it was like maybe one of the guys in the newsroom playing a prank on me. And I'm looking around.
We could have done that too. Yeah.
Is this for real? And so it's a true story. On my way to City Hall, I met him at Chili's, and we had dinner at Chili's. And that's when he basically said, "I'd like to offer you a job, and I'd like for you to come work at Channel 6. And I was like, "Great. I want to be a sports anchor. This is going to be fantastic." And he's, "Oh, no. I hear you in the morning. You're great. I want to keep you in news. I want you to cover City Hall. I want you to cover the school board." I was like, oh, my gosh. And I'm sitting there, I cannot believe this. He wants to keep me in news. And so he was like, "What do you think? Would you like to do it?" And I tried to play coy. I love the immediacy of radio. I just love the excitement. I don't know if I really want to do television. And he said, look, we'll also give you a clothing allowance. We'll give you like a $500 clothing allowance. I was like, so let's get it. And he offered me the job right then and there. And that's how I got my job at Channel 6.
The clothing allowance is what put you over the top, huh?
When he said $500 clothing allowance, I was like, I'm sold.
You know, you still have to pay taxes on the clothing allowance, so I found that the hard way.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, that's
so
how
wait,
I got.
Did you start to weasel your way a little bit into sports? Because were you working nightside at that point at Channel 6?
So what I used to always like pitch like sports related stories if it wasn't City Hall related, like Ohio State type stories. Hey, let's do a story on who's going to win the Heisman. Is it going to be Eddie George or is it going to be? And they'd be like, hey, I like that. Or, hey, let's do a story on John Cooper. If he wins this game against Michigan, how much of a bonus he gets? I was always pitching like
That's it. That didn't happen, though. That was a hypothetical.
Right? Exactly. In those days, they would always lose to Michigan. And so that's how I weaseled my way. But I was still, for the most part, strictly news at that point.
So when did sports enter the picture? For real?
Sports entered the picture. I think I was at Channel 6 for a couple of years. And I ended up getting an agent because I remember you guys had on the 6 on your side, you had I don't know if she was like the coordinating producer or executive, a woman named Dina Brown. That was after me, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And so Dina came to me and said, God, I remember she said, you were way too talented to be here in Columbus, Ohio. You know, what's your ultimate goal? And I said, to be honest with you, I said, I want to go to Dallas. That's where I've always wanted to live. I love the Dallas Cowboys. I love everything Dallas. That's where I want to live. And she was like, you ought to get an agent and get up out of here. And that's what I did. I ended up getting an agent. I had a top 10 out in my contract because they figured I'm a young pup. I ain't going nowhere. I remember Mike telling me, he said, Angela Pace is over at Channel 4. She's like the queen of Columbus television. He's like, you're going to be the king. You're from Columbus, born and bred here. You're going to make so much money here. And this is going to be your home forever. But for me, I wanted to go bigger places. And Dallas was, to me, the ultimate at that time. And I got an agent. I went to Dallas. Fortunately, it was another job in news. And they wanted me to cover City Hall because politics is very big in Texas. And so I had to cover City Hall in Dallas. So I did that for maybe the first 6 months. And they promoted me to the weekend news anchor, like after 6 months of being there at the CBS affiliate in Dallas. And I think I did that for maybe another year or two. And they ended up firing basically the entire sports staff while I was there. And I never forget it, the GM and the news director came to me and said, man, I heard you were always in the sports department talking with the sports guys and this and that. You want to be the sports anchor? I was like, thank you, Jesus. Yes. And they switched me over from news to sports.
Wow. And then
So that was great of you to get them fired. That was
yeah, what did you do? Were you in there talking to them like leak some information?
That's the way the news business is.
You know, right. It's cutthroat, bro.
There's an opening.
Yeah.
Hey, it was bad for them, but you took there was an opportunity. You saw an opportunity. You saw an opportunity.
I want to go back because Hevel didn't try another $500 on the clothing. He didn't try to get you to
No, he did. Yeah. Listen, there was nothing they could do. Once I got that job in Dallas, I was gone. I was out. I think him and a woman, Terry Simonich, I think she was the assistant news director. And I was like her pet peeve. She looked over my writing. She made sure every story I did, she looked at it to make sure it was done correctly. And I give them a lot of credit because I was so green. I was like 23 or whatever. And they brought me in and hell, they put me right up in there. And I was covering City Hall and all kinds of stuff there at Channel 6.
Yeah, no, we all had to cover at some point in our careers the school board meetings and the budget meetings. And,
oh my God.
But if you would find something, I remember once dropping in on I got stuck on a school board meeting about the budget, and I started looking through the budget. I'm like, what's this and what's this? You're coming at it with fresh eyes, And then I went out to the clubs.
Try to get a better gig.
Heppel tried with me. He tried to get me to, I don't know if he even was really trying that hard to get me to stay, but he's like, I'll give you the noon show. You can anchor the noon show. I'm like, nobody watches the noon show.
Wait, was that when you were going to Baltimore?
That's when I was going to Baltimore. Yeah, I'll tell you the real story about what happened with yeah.
Wow. So you find yourself, so how long were you at SYX then before you took the Dallas job?
I arrived in Dallas. I was just turning 26. So I was at Channel 6 for, I want to say, maybe 2 years. I was 22.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So maybe 2 years.
Okay. So then you ended up, you end up at Dallas for several years, 8 years, right?
8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I was there for like 9 years, man. That was, I tell you, that was like my ultimate. There, if people would say New York, LA, I remember that was the first thing my agent said. Where you want to go? You want to go to New York? You want to go to LA? I said, get me to Dallas. I just want to live in Dallas.
And you were born in Ohio, so why were you such a Cowboys fan? Family, like what?
Just
not going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I loved Tony Dorsett as a kid. Okay. He was like my idol. And when I played football, I wanted to be Tony Dorsett. I loved everything. Obviously, the show was big, but I wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy so bad as a kid. And I even said that. I said, once I got in my professional career, I've got to cover the Dallas Cowboys. That, to me, that was going to be the ultimate of my professional career. So that was all I was thinking at the time.
So what was that like the first time you interviewed, what, Troy Aikman or?
My first interview was Tony Dorsett. It was Tony. And
your big idol. Wow.
It was when I got there, Tom Landry had passed. And so it was obviously a huge story. Right. And it was like, hey, we got to get reaction. And they were like, hey, look, Brian, we're going to send you to Tony Dorsett's house. He's the guy who introduced Tony Dorsett at the Hall of Fame. When he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, it was Tom Landry who gave the introduction for Tony. And so, man, oh my God. I mean, it took everything in my power to be professional, because I'm sitting across from this guy I idolized. I saw him as a giant, and I'm in there, we're talking, and we had such a great interview. And after we got through, I just told him, I said, look, Tony, I know this may be unprofessional, but I love you. I've loved you since I was 7. I love you now. And to have this, I said, can I call my mother and just let my mother know that I'm here with Tony Dorsett? And he was like, yeah, call. We ended up calling my mother. And I was just like, man, can we hug? Can we? And I remember I said, I wish I had something, Tony. I said, and I know this sounds bad, that you could sign. I said, I even have a T-shirt that has a caricature of you on it that I had as a kid. I still have that shirt. And he was like, oh my God. He was like, really? I said, yeah, it was from the mall. It was pressed on. And he said, really? I said, I still have it. He said, my man, if you have that shirt, I'd like to see it, because I like to show my kids that, you know what? I really was somebody. And he allowed us, me and true story, me and my photographer went back to my house. I went and got the T-shirt. We stopped off at the sporting goods store. We got these footballs. He signed footballs for us.
Oh, wow.
The shirt, he signed the shirt that I had since I was like 8. It was great. Now we're friends, man. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable day.
He missed deadline that day, by the fact.
Yeah. The story never made it. It was cute. The producer's like,
Brian, where are you? Over, Brian.
You're like, dude, the story's not going to make it, but look at the autographs we got.
Look at the memorabilia we got. I think I still have the football right up over here.
But I won't, because I'm keeping it. Wow. But how nice is it that it doesn't always happen that your idols turn out to be the people that you really hope they are? So that's kind of nice that someone that you would put up on a pedestal, that they turned out to be the person.
And that he wanted proof for his own kids.
That's it was funny. His kids at the time, he was like, yeah, they really never saw my career. They didn't really think I was that big stuff. And I showed him the shirt. It was old and ring. He's like, look, this guy's got this shirt. I don't need since he was a kid. And then, his kids are looking at it. And
like, sure, Dad, man, it was whatever. Yeah. No,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We try to tell our kids the same thing. We were a big deal when you were little, and they're like, yeah, whatever. Show me proof.
I was on the Food Network. Good, cook something.
Yeah,
for dinner. Yeah.
Did you learn to cook? Yeah.
So who was coaching the Cowboys when you were there? Who was the coach?
And when I got there, Barry Switzer was there. He was there. He was just getting fired because oh my God. I was there in the height of the White House scandal that they had when the players had this house up in Valley Ranch that they brought their girlfriends so their wives wouldn't know. And they brought them and they bought a house there near the facility. And that's where they brought all their girlfriends and they would just party there. And they had drugs and it was just such a big scandal. That was like the ending of the dynasty at that time. And so Barry Switzer was there. And then they just started going through coaches, Chan Gailey, you can name Dave Campo. They were going through coaches. Obviously Parcells was there when I was there. So it was quite a time to be in Dallas at that point.
What's it like interviewing Jerry Jones?
Jerry's great, man. He's a character. He's one of those, he's Joe Biden like. Sometimes he will say stuff that he's not supposed to say and he'll trip over his own words. But Jerry's one of those guys, especially when I was there and when I was young and single there in Dallas, you be at a swanky club and sometimes you see Jerry Jones up in that club with his security. So that's why his relationship with the media is so good there locally, because they know Jerry. Hey, Jerry, back in the day, he would throw him down with you too. You know, you find him at the right spot.
I think there's a whole second podcast here about the whole thing, the real story, the White House,
yes, especially when Barry Switzer was head coach, because they were really tight from back in the day. And man, Jerry and Barry used to hang in all kinds of spots up in Dallas. So yeah, it was a fun time to be there at that time.
We interviewed Dale Hansen on the show, and
Dale has some legendary run-ins with oh my God, with Barry. Oh my goodness, they were on air live.
And he kept hitting them, and he hit them, and
yes, exactly.
Did you ever have any run-ins like that, or
no? I never had anything like that. But yeah, Dale. Yeah, those were classics, I would say.
So there was a recent article in Sports Illustrated about essentially the death of the local sportscasting legend.
Yeah.
So the Dale Hansens, the
George Michael,
Glenn Brett. Yeah. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's what's happening?
Yeah, I think a lot of it.
Bryan Custer's. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Because of these young kids. Look, I have a 13-year-old, and he gets everything from YouTube clips. He looks at his phone for everything. I think that has a lot to do with it. I think streaming has a lot to do with it as well. But even if you look at the local angle, it's not like local stations anymore. It's even Dallas. Dallas is a great sports town, and it was probably one of the few who still had somewhat of an emphasis in sports, but not anymore. Now the sportscast at the most 2 minutes. You know, they want that first block to be news, whether it be 10 or 11 minutes. Then the rest has got to be weather. That's obviously the big focal point now for local news. But they streaming and obviously ESPN, they figure, why do we invest in sports when people are going to watch ESPN for the highlights? And if they're not, they're going to get on their phone and get on YouTube or whatever and find the scores and everything else through streaming.
So how do you combat that? I think you're combating it by being on ESPN. And
exactly. I was going to say, for me, hey, look, keep watching ESPN. So that's a good thing for me. I think it is tough for the local stations now. I mean, I still have love for them, but I'll even be honest now, even here, obviously we get the local New York news here. I really watch it just for the weather. I just need to know what's the weather going to be like, so when I pack and get up out to town, what I need to pack for. But other than that, I don't watch the local sports guys here.
What if the local TV stations, I don't think they change with the times. I mean, if I were a local TV stations, I would be covering the high school sports and the local colleges. Well, colleges are pretty well covered by ESPN, but all the
women's
high school
sports,
I would be filling the gaps that the national news isn't going, but it just seems like they're not doing that.
I know. And I think like even in Texas, and again, I go to use Dallas as an example. That's what they've done. They put more of a focus on, obviously, because football is so big there. the high school sports now kind of dominates it a lot. Obviously Cowboys, Mavericks, all that type of stuff, but it's combined now with a lot of high school stuff there because it is so big there, and that's how they get more time and still do their Sunday night shows. But you're right, other markets, you just feel like, hey, look, we'll give you a minute and a half, maybe two, if that, and that's it.
So when did the Big Apple come calling?
Big Apple came calling after I think I had been at the CBS affiliate there in Dallas for quite a while. And I just got antsy. I mean, after a while, I got to a point where I was like, this has been great. This is great, but I know this isn't my future. It was great walking around town and everybody knows you, but I always felt like there was something bigger and better. And I remember my agent was talking to me. He was like, why don't you come to New York? And I really hadn't thought about it. And he said, there's a new network that's coming and it's called SNY, and it's owned by, half of it's owned by the Mets. The Jets have a piece of ownership in it, and it's going to be like the ESPN of New York sports because there's so many sports teams in New York. It's going to be nothing but sports shows where you show highlights of all the New York sports teams. And he was like, it's going to be great. And I remember flying out and I just flew out just for the interview, just for the heck of it. And at the time, the guy who was running it, he was second in command, was a guy, Kurt Gowdy Jr., who obviously his father, Gowdy, is a legend.
Let me tell Kathy, Kurt Gowdy was a legendary NBC baseball announcer and football, but mostly he was really well known. He and Tony Kubiak. I'm showing my age, really, but I'm doing this because Kathy was born in 1990.
Oh my goodness.
That is not true.
Oh my goodness. Put it like this, Kathy. Kurt Gowdy he called the first couple Super Bowls.
Wow.
And first couple of Super Bowls, like some of the historic World Series, that's Kurt Gowdy. And then if you remember back in the day, there was something called, was it ABC Wide World of Sports?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kurt Gowdy used to host that as well. So he's a legend. So his son was the vice president of SNY, and he was the guy who flew me out and said, look, man, I saw your stuff in Dallas. I love it. You work with Parcells. I see how you got along with Parcells. Here in New York, it's a different beast. The media is different. You got to know your stuff. These fans are different. And I think you can hack it. You can handle it. And we want you aboard. And I ended up taking the job. I was like one of the first 8 that they hired. We started the network in 2006.
Is there a studio like right near Grand Central? Is that the studio?
It was a sidewalk studio. We were right across the street from Radio City.
Radio. Okay. That's what, yeah. Is
51st and 6th.
Yeah.
51st and 6th is now downtown on Wall Street. But yeah, for the first, I would say I was there for 9 years, but for the first 8-9 years, it was right there, 51st and 6th.
And what do you think it is about your style that set you apart, that got you all these great gigs, or about what is it that you do that is
Mark, I just think, first of all, I love it. I'm passionate about this business. I've always wanted to do it. I knew that this was, I think some of us are called to do different things. And I always felt like this was my calling. That's number one. And number two, I think I'm a great teammate. In our business, you're right. It's cutthroat. It's nasty. And I just don't think it has to be. I like to have fun wherever I am. And I think everybody who I've worked with, they've always said, man, I enjoyed that guy. Man, he was a great teammate to have. And I remember when I got to Dallas, when it was really competitive, and I felt like I need to make a name for myself. And I remember our coordinating producer, we were having a discussion one time, and he was like, Brian, all you need to do is just be you. Because if you're you and you make your partners look good, the show's going to look good and it will come back to you. And I always remember that. And so I always keep that wherever I go. And I've told you can ask my boss over at Showtime. You can ask the guy, Norby Williamson, who at ESPN, the first thing I always told him when they brought me in and I've had to sign my contract was, I always said, look, this is going to be one of the best hires you ever made. And I've always made that vow to myself, to whomever hires me. I just want to let you know that when your career is over and you say, I hired this guy, I hired this guy, I hired this woman, or I had this person, Bryan Custer was one of the best hires I've ever made. And I've always made that vow to whomever placed their trust in me and hired me.
So you were at SNY for several years, and you've won an Emmy for a documentary about baseball, A Diamond in the Rough. You've been to Showtime, CBS Sports, Fox Sports, ESPN. play-by-play, show on SportCenter. When you were little, like maybe some of these networks, is this what you envisioned? Did you ever envision getting this?
I did. I grew up in Columbus. So now I went to a school there, high school at Westerville North, and playing basketball. I was pretty good. And I used to always say, I want to play basketball at Ohio State. And I always envisioned myself having Dick Vitale call my game. And then I knew I wanted to get into broadcasting too, even when I was in high school. And I used to always tell myself, man, I can't wait till I'm a professional and I'll get to call games with Dick Vitale. I saw that. That's all I envisioned. You know, and it was a surreal moment for me because this past, April in March, I got to do the Final Four. I work with Dick Vitale. And so
wow.
We had such a great time, man. And,
especially with him coming back from his cancer bout.
Absolutely. We talked about that, and he couldn't have been more gracious. He was like, oh my God, Brian, I've watched you and I've seen so much. I just don't want to screw this up. You're a star, baby. You're a star. This is going to be so much fun. And I'm like, save it for the broad. Wait till the game starts. What the hell? But so many people love him, and it was a surreal moment for me, Kath, because it was like, this is what I saw as a youngster, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and here we are about to call the Final Four in the championship game. It was, sometimes I do that. I do this before every show. Like I'll sit right before SportCenter. I'll just take a look around the studio, say a little quick prayer to myself of gratitude. Thank you, because man, as a kid, this is what I dreamed of, and I'm here. And I'll do that before. Sometimes we have fights. We have a huge fight. We'll be in this arena. I'll look at this crowd. The crowd will be all packed. And I'll just, before we go on air, just say that little prayer of gratitude, because I know, maybe 1 million or 2 million people are watching, and this is what I always wanted, and it's here. And I think sometimes you have to take a pause and smell the roses and give thanks for that too.
Do you think that, jumping ahead here, but your battle with prostate cancer made that kind of a difference to where you stop and smell the roses? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, Mark, if it wasn't for cancer, I don't know if I'd be right here doing this with you. And
no, you would be doing this with me, but
no,
you wouldn't be.
Look, if it wasn't for cancer, I could have been dead, to be honest with you. But if I hadn't battled cancer, I don't know if I would be in all those positions where I was, because I probably would have just settled being at SNY and just been like, okay, I'm supposed to be the man here at SNY. They're paying me the most. I guess for security reasons, I guess I'll just stay here. But at the time, I always get these feelings in my gut. I felt like there's so much more for me that I want to do. This is great doing it in New York. It's great being the #1 market in the country. But I felt like I want the world to see what I can do. I want the world to see my talent. I feel like I'm that talented. And I just felt like I was being reined in. And I would tell my boss, Kurt, I would go to Kurt and say, hey, Kurt, hey, I know we have this contract with UConn. I want to call their games. He's like, nah, I just want you to host. I don't want you to call games. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe he knew this guy's good. And if I let him call a game, someone's going to pluck him. He's going to be out of here. But I had, people had tried to get Showtime. They tried to hire me. ESPN, they tried to hire me while I was there. But our contracts were exclusive, so I couldn't leave. At the time when I got diagnosed with cancer, my contract was coming up. It was in the summer. I remember I was in August when I had surgery. My contract was up in December, and they had already started talking to me about re-signing. And I remember I had just had surgery that night. Everybody was gone. You have all these lights, and I had stuff. I had drains connected to me, all kinds of stuff. And I was laying in the bed. And I remember, never forget this. I was laying in there and I was like, hey, I'm going to beat this. I'm not going to die. And then I said, number 2, you know what? If I am going to die, I'm going to die doing something I want to do. And at the time, Showtime had been trying to hire me, and I love boxing. I had loved it as a sport. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not happy anymore at SNY just doing that. I think I'm just going to not resign and go off and call boxing for Showtime. Because they told me that Showtime was like, look, you just get better and we'll find something for you. I don't know what it is, but we'll find something for you. And I had surgery. I remember I recovered, got back to work in 3 weeks, which I don't recommend for other people. But at that time, all I was thinking was, And listen, times are different then. I think that you got to think back. That was a good 10 years ago.
Was it
cancer now? People
or so? 2014.
Beg pardon?
2014.
Yeah. So now networks are more understanding. But back then, all I was thinking was, man, if I don't come back, these cats are going to think I'm going to die. They're going to maybe try to phase me out. And so I came back quickly. And obviously SNY was like, no, we want you to sign a new 3-year deal. And I just I remember I telling Kurt, I walked in his office and I said, man, thank you for supporting me through all this. It's been a great ride, but I can't sign that. I said, I think at the end of this contract, I'm going to go off and do boxing. And I remember Kurt looked at me and said, boxing? And I said, you know, I love the sport. And I think I'd like to do that. And he said, Brian, if you don't resign and you go off to do boxing, your career is over.
Really?
Your career is dead. That was the exact quote he said to me. And he was like, boxing's dead and your career is dead. And for me, that's all you need to tell me. I'm motivated. All you need to do is motivate me a little bit.
So you know?
Yes. And when he told me that, it was a wrap. And so I knew it was time for me to leave and I was going to prove him and everyone else wrong. And that's what I did. I didn't resign, went to Showtime, and I was doing the undercard stuff. I was just hosting press conferences, calling the prelim fights. I made half the money that I was making at SNY. My wife hated me at the time because of that. I had no insurance, nothing. We had to go on her insurance, all kinds of stuff. And I remember doing that for about almost a year until Showtime got rid of their main host guy. And that's when my boss came to me and was like, are you ready to be the face of Showtime Boxing? I was like, hell yeah. And he gave me the promotion. And it's like, as soon as I got that, Fox Sports called me, or, hey, love the way you call boxing. If you call boxing like that, you probably call the hell out of football, basketball. And then I started working there at Fox Sports, started doing that. And I was there for a while. And then ESPN just kept calling. And then obviously the stars aligned right. And they were like, look, we want you to come over here to call not only college football, college basketball, but we want you to host SportCenter. We want you to call NBA games. We want you to be on NBA radio. And they laid out everything that I wanted to do and allowed me to keep my Showtime gig. Because as I told them, Showtime is what they were the ones who took me to the national level and believed in me. And I was like, I will not give that up. And they were like, fine, we will make arrangements that when you have Showtime stuff, you don't have ESPN stuff. And it's been great.
And you didn't have to move to Bristol.
And I did move to Bristol. Now, I don't like the drive sometimes because I have to stay up at the hotel there.
Oh, you have to schlep to Bristol? You have to, they don't have
I do.
downtown New York or anything?
No, when I do get up, it's great because it is in New York and they have a car that comes and gets you, and that's phenomenal. But when you got to do SportCenter, yeah. And so I always tell them, book me in blocks. So they usually book me at like 3-4 days at a time. I go up to Bristol. They put me up at the hotel. People who live, they know. They put you up at the hotel there and you just stay there for 3 days, 4 days, and you do your SportCenters, and I come on back home.
I have so many questions. First of all, how do you keep your schedule? What do you have?
Yeah, I can't imagine what your phone calendar looks like. I hope you have an assistant that is keeping you straight, because it seems like your life there's just too much going on.
People always ask me, do you have a personal assistant? And I don't. I'm old school, and I have a calendar on my desk that I write everything on. I do. I don't keep nothing in my phone. I keep everything on my desk, on my calendar, and I'll take a picture of it for every month that I have. And so when people ask me, like, I have to do UFC stuff for ESPN this week, and then the SportCenter people will email me and say, hey, can you do SportCenter these dates? And I'll go to my phone and I'll look at the calendar and I'll look and say, oh no, oh shoot, I got a Showtime fight that week. And then I have to email them back and say, I got a Showtime fight. But that's how I do it.
Wow. Okay. So
I don't recommend it, but that's how I do it.
Hey, it works. Whatever works.
Like you, early in my career, I did whatever and so I did do some sports.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a really stupid question. I'm just fat. How do you keep the players straight? You're doing basketball games. You're doing football games. How do you know who's who and how does that work?
What memory pills do you start?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting old and I need some memory pills. Yeah.
No, it is. The toughest thing is, first of all, college football. The prep for college football is basically all week. because you're reading it, getting online, reading the papers about those teams, because you got to act as if you've been there. When you call in Ohio State football, and you know this, Mark, you call in Ohio State and you don't know what's been going on in Columbus that week, oh boy, you're going to hear about it on social media and everybody. So you got to spend the whole week getting online, reading the papers of that particular town that college is in, and for the opponent. And then the rest is talking to those SIDs and getting the pronunciation of all those names. Because there's nothing worse than calling a college football player by the wrong. Oh my God, your social media. I don't even look at it sometimes, because if you say one wrong oh my goodness, the names you're called are horrendous.
Giannis. I can't say Giannis's last name. How do you say Giannis's last name?
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
What you just said. There you go.
Yes. You messed up the first name, I think.
See, I can't. There's the memory goals. That's what I was happy I pulled the name.
The professional sports to me is pretty good, because other than maybe some soccer, especially from doing SportCenter, and hockey, that's the death. The death is you're doing SportCenter and a hockey game ends during the show and they're running that shot sheet up to you. And at some point in this highlight, you're getting a Russian name and you're like, oh, Jesus. The best part is if you're working with somebody who feels your pain. So like Jay Harris, or let's say Hannah Storm's great at this. You will get that highlight and you're sitting there and you're like, let's moved to the third. And then at that time, this is when Igor Shesterkin hits to go. And she'll say, what was that again? Oh, right. Because she knows you done messed it up, but she just wants you to try to do it again on air. You're like, I see how you are, but you have fun with it. So it's better when you've got a friend working with you. But let me tell you something, that is the worst. When you get a hockey highlight and you know that name's coming, and it's like, oh,
that's what I can't imagine. The names, there's just so many tough names. And after a while, you probably get pretty good. Yeah. I can kind of guess this Russian name because I've seen enough of them that you guess. And most of the time you're probably right. But when you get tripped up, you're like, and there's nothing that makes people feel worse. Cause if you're that player on the field or on the ice.
Oh my God. And listen, all I'm thinking about is that mom at home. Oh my God, I messed up the little baby's name. But oh my God, the stuff you get on social media for college football, it is, man. That's why I spend that Friday night. All I'm doing is looking at the names, and that's most of my prep.
So Seton Hall basketball, talk about fans and how invested they are. You're considered a good luck charm, I understand. So do you feel extra pressure calling their games because they think they're going to win every time they get you?
Yeah. So some folks in Jersey, for those who know, when I was at Fox Sports, they have the Big East contract. So I did a lot of Big East basketball. And I think Seton Hall, we went 4.5 years. Whenever I did a Seton Hall game, they never lost. And there were some crazy wins. I mean, wins where they were down by a point with 1.4 seconds to go. They threw it in, guy caught it, tipped it, and it went in. Any way you can think of winning, Seton Hall has won with me calling the game. So when I've walked into the Prudential Center for a Seton Hall, you'd be like, oh, he's here. The Messiah's here. I mean, they were going to have a bobblehead night for me one night. It was great. At one point, I was trying to convince my kids to go to Seton Hall. They were going to let my kids go there free. I'm like, yo, why don't y'all go to Seton Hall?
Sounds good to me. Yeah. Go.
It's a great college. But they wanted to leave the nest, so to speak. But yeah, it was great. I think I can't remember if they went 27-0 or 28-0, something like that, with me calling Seton Hall games. And I have a nice cult following there in Jersey at Seton Hall.
What were you, what did you say you went the record was 18-1 or something like that?
Yeah, something like 20 something. It was like
20.
And they finally lost. They finally lost like one of my last games doing it. They finally lost, and then I left, and I was like, okay, I guess this is a good time for me to go over to ESPN. Everything's over.
Like, I broke the record. I gotta leave.
So we got Showtime, which is also they're still owned by CBS, and you're also doing CBS Sports, right? Is that true?
No, so Showtime, and now Paramount is taking over everything, which is basically CBS now. They're going through some changes, like most networks.
And you got an ESPN.
ESPN.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what else? That's it?
Yeah, I think
you're doing
that. I have my own podcast, so I've been doing
that.
that.
Podcast, right.
Yes. Yeah, that it keeps me busy.
And more importantly, what's your clothing allowance these days?
Strangely enough, it's a lot more than 500, which is fantastic.
Thank goodness.
You do look sharp. You always look really sharp there.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's been good, man. Life has been good. I'm proud of where I am, but I also feel like there's a lot more that I want to do. And
so what's next then? What's the next question? What's next for you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I did, and I said this to one of the bosses that were there at ESPN. We were talking, and he said the same thing. He was like, "So what do you want to do?" And I told him, I said, "I think when it's all said and done, when people talk about ESPN, I want to be one of the Mount Rushmore faces that they talk about. You know, whether it is doing more sports centers, also doing Get Up, and then really making a name for myself, whether it's being the lead. We talked about being a lead college basketball play-by-play guy, doing a lot more NBA games. So I just think, unlike some over at the network who are phenomenal at SportCenter, or they may just be phenomenal at play-by-play for one sport, I like to spread my wings into everywhere and try to be the best at all of them, which is something that I don't think few have mastered.
Wow.
So you also, just to talk a little PSA too about, I say, public service announcement, but also PSA, like prostate cancer, you have, because you were very young and you survived.
And you were open about it. And you talked about it during a time that, guys were not talking about it.
But you also are a spokesperson now, right? For the prostate cancer.
I was trying to hide it. So with the Prostate Cancer Foundation, I'm going to start working with the American Cancer Society as well. Yeah, I mean, it was a shocker to me because I work out every day. I'm usually in the gym like by 5 a.m.
And black belt in Taekwondo or what?
Yeah, well, dude, I'm a second degree in Taekwondo. Usually I'm in the gym boxing and working out. And even back then, 10 years ago, in fact, the anniversary will be 10 years this August. I was still in the best shape of my life. I was mean, lean, 41, 42. And unlike other people in my family, I'm probably one of the only guys who go to the doctor every year to get a physical. And I was doing that. And I just remember him telling me, "You're 40 now, you need to, get a PSA done for your prostate." I didn't even know what my prostate was, what it did. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And we did it. We did the checkup. I didn't like the digital rectal exam.
Yeah, then you remember what a prostate is. Once you get
exactly. Then
you never forget.
Yes. Then I started thinking about that Fletch movie. Oh, so that was what that was about. Okay.
River. Yeah.
Exactly.
Your whole fist up there, Doc. Yeah.
And listen, I think at 41, had my exam. But when he tried to give me the PSA, I was like, Doc, we already did that last year. I'm good. Nah, the results were bigger. No, forget about that. And then when we did it again, I had my exam at 42. He was like, "Hey, let's do the PSA." And I was like, we did it last year. Well, forget about that. And he was like, "No, we didn't do it last year. You said no." And luckily he insisted and I had it done, and he felt the bump on my prostate and I had to come back and do it again. And he felt the bump again. The results were, they always tell you, a general practitioner will tell you if your results are a 4 or higher, so you had something going on. Mine was a 5.4. And once I had that biopsy done, man, I'll never forget it. Doc told me, "Look, your cancer, this for you, look, I'll just tell you what he said. He said, it's not fucking around. It's aggressive. I got to get you in surgery like immediately." Wow. And I was like, "Damn, Doc, I've never really had major surgery in my life. Can we try something? Let's do radiation, or is there a pill I can take?" And he was like, "Yeah, we can try whatever you want. It's really your decision. I can give you some recommendations." He said, "But I'll be honest with you, if those things don't work, you'd probably be dead in a year." And I was like, "Oh man." But he referred me to a specialist, Dr. David Samadi, who did my surgery. And I remember Dr. Samadi, he said, "Listen, you're going to be okay. You're going to be great. You're in the best hands with me. I'm the best when it comes to this surgery." And he said, "I'm only going to ask one thing of you. I hope that you'll use your platform to tell men that prostate cancer is really affecting men of color at 3 times the rate of white men. And you got to get out on bully pulpit and let people know. And I was like, I ain't letting nobody know I got this. I've heard about incontinence. I've heard about you'll be sterile. I've heard about I don't want people to know I'm a 41, 42-year-old man and that I'm going to be sterile. I may have incontinence and this. And he said, you're worried about that as opposed to saving your life and saving other people's life? Where's your priorities? And he put it to me like that. And I was like, wow. Fuck. And I remember coming back home praying on it. And I was like, he's right. That's very selfish of me. If this guy's going to save my life, I need to help save other people's lives. And it's amazing, Mark, that once I had the surgery and I came out and I was really public about it and talked about everything that comes with it, so many men, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, who were young like me in their 40s were so scared to talk about it that even in what about this and will I be able to this and I can't believe da. And I just give them the real skinny about it and say, hey, look, the most important thing is you're alive and well. And it's been a blessing, man. It really has. It's been a blessing just seeing other guys having to go through it and feeling comfortable because I didn't have anybody to talk to at the time. There was nobody I could lean on, and to do that for other people, it's comforting. And I just hope that I've done a little bit of good that Dr. Smati wanted me to do.
Reading up about you and then reading about everything about you, I made an appointment. I made an appointment for my checkup for next week.
I think I'm late on my appointment.
Right. Plus, I'm looking forward to the exam.
I don't think what people don't realize is that they call it the silent killer for a reason, because with prostate cancer, there are really no symptoms unless it's really bad. See, I didn't have it, those symptoms. Like some people who may have problems urinating at night, feel like they got to urinate, but it doesn't come out. Or some people who are urinating like 24/7 all the time. Okay, those are telltale signs you got something going on. But for me, you got to understand, I had nothing. There was not one thing. There's no pain. And they call it the silent killer for a reason, because you don't feel anything until it's too late. And when it's too late is when the cancer leaves your prostate and it goes to your spine and it goes up your spine and it's a wrap. And I'll never forget that. I asked Dr. Smati, I said, if I didn't go to the doctor, when would I have known I had this? He said, you would have probably got up one day and had the worst back pain you've ever had in your life. So bad that you would have had to call an ambulance just to help you get up. And he said, that's when they would have taken you to the hospital and said, oh my God, you've got cancer and it's all up your spine and it's spread already. He said, that's when you would have known you had prostate cancer. And so he told me, he said, listen, if this spreads, that's why I got to get your prostate out of you now. If it spreads, he said, the only thing I do for you, Brian, is make you comfortable. He said, I'm just going to be honest with you. Wow. That's why we got to hurry up and get it out and see where you are.
And most of the time, it's not real. It's a very beatable cancer, but it's the early prevention.
Absolutely.
It's the screening.
Yes, absolutely. If you catch it early, like for me, they caught it, got it out. Now, my numbers went up like a couple of years afterwards. I had to go through radiation.
Which you also helped me with, because a buddy of mine has had prostate cancer. He's had his prostate removed. And then he called me up last week or whatever, and he had to go in to get radiation. And like, I thought they got rid of the prostate. But you had the same thing. And I was like, okay, so he's okay. I was worried.
And now the explanation, like the doctor told me, was it's like when you're in war and you drop the atomic bomb on a city. There are some who anticipate you're going to make that move. And so what do? They go down into a bunker, and then you drop that bomb, and then they sit in the bunker for maybe 6 months or so and think, you know what? It's been a while. I think we can probably come back up. And then they come back up to see, hey, I guess everything is good now. And that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes they go in, they get it, and they think they've gotten everything out, but there's maybe a little things that have droplets that have gotten out as they've taken it out, but they don't start to form and do all that. From maybe it may take a year, may take 2 years, may take 3, may take 5 years before they start to really, I don't want to say metastasize, but start to formulate. But the great thing is now with radiation, it could be so pinpoint that you can zap those whatever 2 spots that they find, and you should be pretty good. That's why they say you generally you shouldn't start with radiation, because if you start with radiation and you zap those 1, 2, but you didn't get all of them, now you're messed up, because now they're everywhere and you can't use radiation anymore and you're done.
Wow.
All right, last call. We got to let them go.
I know we do, but anyway, that's great, and thanks for that. Because
so get checked. That's the whole point.
Checked.
Go get because they catch that on the front end. You're, for the most part, you are golden. Just
get checked yearly, because like you
yes.
missed 1 year, and it can be the
see what happened.
My
results double in a year, and I still go. Listen, I go every 6 months. Every 6 months I get a PSA test.
All right, I'm going to recap real quick.
Okay.
What did I learn? Be yourself.
Yep.
Be the best employee or the best hire that your boss has ever had.
Yeah.
Give a moment of thanks. Thanks for the
grateful every day.
Right.
Envision your life, where you're going to go.
Have a really good agent.
Agent,
apparently, because whoever his agent is, you still with that person?
Shout out to Brian Jacobs over there, CAA. Absolutely. Yeah.
Clothing allowance, very important.
Yes. Very important.
Very important.
Deal.
Yeah.
And
travel. Those are 2 musts when I come to my contract. Look, am I flying business class? And can I get transportation?
Don't put me in a Motel 6, please.
Yeah. Good hotel. Very important. I had that in my Food Network contract.
Did you?
First year was like, we were staying in places we didn't know whether to leave the equipment in the hotel or take it with us, which was safer. I brought tongs to bring the bed cover down. Yeah. And then it became Marriott level or above. That's what I was.
And your last thing there is keep track of your friends. Keep in touch with your old friends who you started.
And take note of them, because listen, being there at Channel 6 was great. Obviously, that was the start for me. As we talked about, Selena used to sit right across from me. Mark would be right over there. But
with my feet up. Yeah.
Yeah, with his feet up. But I would take note of how different people did things. And everybody has a talent. And say what you want. Selena may come to him with, hey, look, this story's about this and this. He would listen, say, what about blah, 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 blah. And then they would do it, but it was Mark's talent that made the story sing. And it was his personality and how he carried himself on air. Those are the type of things I took note of, because I was a pup. I was just starting out, but I would take note of that. Wow, okay, cool. He uses his personality. He's comfortable with who he is. And that was something I had to learn, because as you know, Mark, starting out, you didn't know, do I need to be a news? See, I wanted to be in sports. So I was doing news. I was like, do I need to be stiff? I need to be a newsman. I can't show any personality in it. But I saw how he was like, well, he was himself. And it allowed me to say, you know what? I can only be me. And hopefully that's what's going to sell the audience. And that is what I took from Mark when he would do those 6 on your side pieces.
Okay, dude. When you're in DC, I will take you to dinner now.
And now Mark owes you some money. Okay, there's going to be a check involved.
But you're absolutely, it's very nice of you to say those things, and I will dream about them tonight. But
can we repeat them to his children?
Yes. Spencer, who happens to be our producer and has the same last name, is sitting here and now.
It's like, oh, now I'm going to hear from Dad. Did you hear Brian said about me?
The other thing is have a really good Dick Vitale imitation. That was
very good. Yeah.
Thank you. Dick is my guy now. Look, we text all the time, man. We text all the time. So, just be grateful, man, and have that gratitude, because those guys who are, like you say, your heroes, become your friends. And it's one of the best things in the world.
We're honored to say we're both your hero and your friend.
Whether you like it or not.
No. Hey, where's John Anderson?
John Anderson works the nights, man. John Anderson's another legend. Great guy, man. He's good, just witty, sharp. And it's great when you work with people like that, because you know you got to be on, because they're always on. And but yeah, he usually does the night SportCenter. I want to say like the 11 o'clock.
Yeah, he used to be my photog in Tulsa.
Get out of here.
He was a really good photog, but he's an even better sportscaster. He used to play tennis, and he was so intense. Yes. He had that win at any cost, that athletes have, that look in their eye that the athletes have.
He was a track athlete at Missouri, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was a track athlete at Missouri. So I got to, next time we work together, I'm going to mention that to him.
Tell him I say hi and tell him we want him on the podcast. But
love it. I'll do that.
This podcast is about you, Bryan Custer, ESPN, Showtime, his podcast called Last Stand with Bryan Custer. I don't know how he does it, but he does it really well every single time. And it's been amazing catching up with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for the kind words.
Thank you.
And thanks for all your work with prostate cancer, because you're making such a difference on everything you do. So many lessons out of this podcast, but not that we can rank them, but the prostate cancer stuff is amazing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And listen, I'm in DC quite often. So next time I'm in DC, I'm definitely looking you up.
Please.
Right.
Dinner on Mark. I heard it.
I know, exactly.
Dinner on the Mark Media. Yeah.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as you bring your credit card.
Right, exactly.
Please, I would love to hang out. It would be great. We can stay out late. You don't have to get in it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. There's no more midnight shift for me. So it's a bet.
All right. Thank you very much. It was great talking with you.
All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Wow. I love how you took credit for his career.
I did. Yeah. I take full credit.
Thank you.
I didn't say it. He said it.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
I think
I think
says that to
everybody. Over-exaggerated, maybe a smidge, but
he did pay attention a little bit, and he did learn a little bit.
But you should all do. You take a little bit from everybody along the way, and he saw you and Phil
Hayes, another
Selena,
big reporter
back in the day.
He saw me with my feet kicked up, and what better way to be a reporter?
He was an intern back in the day and knew that, saw my gusto. Anyway, well, After Deadline, the media podcast, is a production of On the Mark Media. If you enjoyed what you heard today, would like to hear more interviews with incredible journalists across the country and around the globe, please follow our social media at On the Mark with a C, Media, and subscribe to After Deadline wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, we'll catch up with you after Deadline.
You think I should get the Venmo from him?
No, I don't think so.